A new program recently outlined by the Obama administration on how schools punish students has really brought new attention to the debate over the use of so-called zero-tolerance policies. Earlier this month, the Department of Education and the Justice Department unveiled some new guidelines on school discipline. The steps are meant to reduce suspensions and expulsions practices which officials, including Arnie Duncan, say disproportionately affects minorities.
Youth of color and students with disabilities are far more likely to be removed from school for disciplinary reasons than other students. And African American students are over 3 times more likely than their white peers to be suspended or expelled, often for very similar offenses.
Dr. Daudi Abe is a professor of humanities at Seattle Central Community College. He also has written a book. It's called 6 in the Morning, West Coast Hip-Hop Music, 1987 to 1992, and the Transformation of Mainstream Culture. Dr. Abe, thanks for joining me. You've outlined what you call the achievement discipline gap among African-American students. One of them you cited, Seattle Public Schools, where you say African-American middle school students are 3 times as likely to be disciplined than other groups of students. They make up only 20% of the student population, but account for more than 40% of suspensions and expulsions, 2/3 of which go to males. Why?
Yeah, well, I think first of all, I think there's a lot of overlap between what we're talking about here and what we had with the work that Mr. Agnew is doing, believe, down in Atlanta.
Yeah.
You look at the kind of cultural characteristics that students and teachers bring to the classroom. We're talking about the traditional mainstream American school classroom. It's informed by mainstream values which speak to, kind of respect for authority, facts-based, discourages emotion and impulse. Whereas African-American students lots of times bring in a lot of those exact opposite in terms of being assertive, gaining the floor through participatory interaction.
It sounds like you're talking about a vast cultural chasm between students, many of which who look like me and you, and teachers in many elementary schools that do not look like me and you.
Yeah, there's a term for it. It's called cultural distance. And so when that cultural distance exists between teachers and students, you start to have these cultural conflicts. And so if, the participatory interactive, call response kind of thing, anybody who's been to a black church knows what I mean. And sometimes that involves speaking while the authoritative figure is speaking instead of necessarily waiting to be called in. And, when you have these dynamics at work, what you have are teachers who consider these behaviors rude, inconsiderate, insubordinate, and breaking rules. And so you have the kind of groundwork, the foundation for these conflicts that exist in a classroom between students and teachers laid out right there.
You also outline disciplinary offenses, which you say are objective and subjective. Explain the difference between the two in a classroom setting.
Right. So as I was writing my dissertation on this exact thing about how to lower classroom discipline rates in African American students between grades 4 through 8, which is where this achievement gap and this discipline gap really starts to reveal itself, this distinction between 2 types of discipline came up. One of them being objective discipline, and these would be offenses that fall into the categories of stuff like fighting, assault, bringing drugs or weapons to school, situations where there's not a whole lot of room for interpretation. Now, on the other side, you have objective offenses, and these fall into the categories of insubordination, disruptive conduct, rule breaking, and in the city of Seattle, in the case of Seattle Public Schools, these subjective offenses account for more than 50% of the reasons given by teachers and administrators as to why African American students in Seattle Public Schools are suspended and expelled.
Dr. Daudi Abe, this is a fascinating conversation. I wish we had more time. I do want to invite you to come back and spend more time with me talking about this. That's an open invitation.
Yes, sir. Let's do it again. And go Hawks.
I knew that was coming. I knew you weren't going to let the segment go through. And you know what? We're going to let you have that. Thank you so much, Dr. Abe. We did not get a chance to talk about the Sherman thing.